and welcome to London Property. I'm your host Farnaz Fazaipour, and we're delighted to welcome back to the show Jeremy Davidson. Welcome back.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Today we're going to speak to Jeremy in the context of market update, but really about what are the non-doms saying. Jeremy, what are the non-doms saying?
Bye.
Bye, apart from bye. But we've all been having conversations with the non-doms who have been, turning the market for quite some time. So what are the kind of common theme of things you're hearing?
The thing is, the non-dom tax regime has been death by 1,000 cuts. I mean, it's now gone, but the Tory government started messing around with it years ago, and they reduced the number of years. It was 21 years, and then it was 17, then it was 15. And if you went beyond the number of years, you were allowed to leave the UK for 3 years and then come back, and then they made it 5 years. And 5 years is a long time. 3 years could be like a long holiday for some people, but 5 years is a long time. And so already it was a mere shadow of what it was. But kind of the problem also was excavated by the fact that just as we were closing our doors, other countries were opening theirs. So, and I think that, as usual, there was a huge miscalculation on the part of the government and their advisors as to what the damage would be. They anticipated that most people would stay, whereas in fact, from my perspective, most people have gone. And they started going a long time ago. And there is one unspoken word in the whole conversation, something you're not allowed to talk about in this country. It all started with Brexit, because with the Brexit vote, that started, it's drip, 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 and the drips just got bigger and louder, and to the point now where it depends who your clients were. Most of my clients were European non-doms. They were bankers. If you're an agent working in Kensington and Chelsea, a very large percentage of your buyers would have been European bankers, German, Swiss, French, Italian. They were all non-doms.
Yeah.
They've more or less gone. So I can't really tell you what non-doms are saying. I know that I have a number of clients whose houses I'm trying to sell at the moment who have left and left some time ago. So the conversation is simply, when are you going to find a buyer for my house, Jeremy?
You operate obviously in the top end of the market, primarily around Belgravia, Chelsea, Knightsbridge, etc.
Yeah.
And that is an area that's really been affected by this exodus.
It has. I think if you, my impression would be, and I don't know who else you've spoken to about this, but if you're, let's say, operating in St John's Wood or Hampstead or somewhere like that, maybe it wouldn't have hit you so much, because I think the demographic of the buyers and sellers up there is somewhat different. But certainly around here, with the proximity to the Lycée Français and so on and so forth, it was mainly European. It hit all the European bankers. Those are the people who came and made the City of London. It wasn't the British bankers. They were all at lunch.
But one thing, optimistically, Tom Bill was saying, I think I read it today, that a lot of people are actually also not selling their properties and waiting this government out and hoping that, in 5 years' time, things will be different. So instead of offloading everything that they're holding, this is one man's opinion based on the data, I guess, that he's looking at Knight Frank. But there is also this sort of 4-5 year thing where at the moment I think it's gone down to 4 years, right? So non-dom tax-free status for people coming is 4 years, which it makes London a bit more transient than it was before. It doesn't coincide with school, which is also not helpful, but people are talking about waiting this government out and then seeing a light at the end of the tunnel.
You mean they've left and they may come back? But I don't know.
It depends what stage of their life they're in, right?
But also, I don't know what sort of tax advice they're taking, because I think you have to show that you've left. And part of showing that you've left is selling your property, resigning your memberships to whichever golf club that you happen to be a member of, or
Right.
stuff like that. So I don't really understand that, because HMRC will say you haven't left. You still own your house. You still are a member of 5 Hertford Street or whatever it may be, or Wentworth or something like that. So I don't really get that. I think the HMRC will try and suggest that you've not left the country.
Well, I guess that's a bit more detailed tax talk.
Yeah, but it's all
But I
about
think
tax.
it is all about
This
tax.
whole
But I guess
conversation
the
is about tax. I mean,
It is.
for the rich, it is always about one thing. It is about tax. So it's a tax conversation.
no, I don't disagree with that. But what I'm saying is that if there was to be a U-turn and if there was to be another solution, then the chances of that happening are more likely to happen at the end of this parliament. And embarrassingly, it looks like things are not going so well again with our government and our leaders. And this is sort of becoming a bit of a...
So you think people will wait for the outcome of the next election? But you could be going out of the frying pan into the fire. You have the prospect of Nigel Farage as Prime Minister. I mean, I think that would send more people away than ever before. I mean, obviously there's so much that can happen. I think that as far as the current government is concerned, I think they're probably quite pleased that all the bad news is now, and they've got 4 years to build, by little steps. Build. I personally speaking, I think I wouldn't be at all surprised if there isn't a second Labour term. What are the alternatives?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a shit show, frankly.
Yeah. So on that subject, though, presumably you're having conversations with people who've been affected, and I've been having conversations with people who are actually really reluctant and don't want to go, where their husbands have left and they're just like, oh my God, I hope something changes. I really don't want to move. Are you hearing any sensible suggestions? And I know some business leaders are having these conversations directly with government ministers, but are you hearing any sensible suggestions of what people would find palatable? I mean, I think the inheritance tax is what killed it, but what options are people saying if they did this? I would say that you've heard that seems sensible.
I mean, obviously, there's some talk that they're re-looking at things under pressure from business leaders talking to the Treasury and talking to the Chancellor. But those same business leaders were doing that before I mean, she was set up by the former Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt. He's the one who, they knew they were going to lose the last election. And so he announced in his last budget that they were going to abolish the non-dom tax regime. And she fell right into the trap. What she could have done was say, we understand that that's what the former government wanted to do, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer wanted to do, but we have spoken to all our Treasury advisors and we have been told that if we do this, it will be very damaging for the UK. Therefore, we are not going to do it. That's all she needed to do, but she didn't. And so we're now stuck in the situation that we have. And the problem is that I think that whatever there is now, I think the big problem is that a lot of trust has evaporated. Trust is it's a big thing to move country to country. It's not something. So if you've already got one foot out and somebody says, well, look, maybe we might sort of I don't think it's going to mean that you're immediately going to jump back in. You're going to need to see some kind of. You're going to have to be pretty convinced, because I think the trust is the whole thing, and I think that it's very sad, because that was one of the bases that people came here originally, was that they thought the UK was a safe, reliable place where the people were pragmatic and sensible, and that's proven to have been somewhat, well, not I wouldn't say a myth, but our reputation for being safe, reliable, pragmatic, and sensible has somewhat gone out of the window since. I'll say it again. Since 23rd of June 2016, should never have happened. And that changed it. So many people's view of the UK. We became unreliable.
Yeah, I'm not going to get too political, because I just don't follow.
But it is political because
but I think everybody who's trying to win votes goes after housing because it is the one thing that's going to get everybody's attention, because everybody lives in a home. So most people live in a home. And I think that, when we do our news bulletins, I see it all the time, that it's just like all the time the politicians are talking about one thing or another to do with housing. Like, you know,
Sure.
1.5 million homes are going to be built, but the memo didn't get to the planning department. So, you know, it's like you can't build 1.5 million homes if planning department is failing 157 units based on one not having the right of light. So, you know, the whole thing isn't really working together, and it keeps happening again and again. And I don't think you and I are going to change it. But it is a little bit of a generational thing as well, I think. I think if you were at a retiring age, then, you know, you were considering going to the Bahamas and golfing.
No.
So you're just like, okay, well, I'll just go earlier.
I agree. I think that what
that's going to make a difference.
I think what happened in London, the city of London, the Big Bang in 1986, 87, that's when all of the young European bankers came to London. They all came, they're all like 26, 27, 28 years of age. They all came. They all did exceptionally well. Most of them did exceptionally well. By the time the Brexit vote came around, they were already in their late 40s, early 50s. Then, with all the tinkering with the non-dom laws in various budgets by various different chancellors until the final nails in the coffin, they were all going, well, hey, you know, and the government says, oh, people won't leave. What they fail to understand is that these people have got homes elsewhere already.
So it's really easy for them to
They just get on a plane. They've got a wardrobe in their house in the south of France or the Loire Valley or in Stade or wherever it is. You know, it's just it's easy for them to leave. It's not like this big thing.
Yeah.
It's pretty straightforward. And yes, it hit a lot of people at the time where they said, okay, well, you don't want us. We're done. We're out of here. You know, we'll bye.
So I guess the bigger question is, what are the young doing?
A lot of the young are staying.
A lot of the young are staying.
I mean, I know somebody who knows 80 of her friends, 80 families, 80, she knows a lot of people, you know who I'm talking about, I think, have left. But of those 80 families, quite a lot of the children have stayed. The children are in their you know, late 20s and early 30s and so on. They've actually stayed because they love living in London. But, you know, when those people get more serious in their career, that might be when they move. But for a lot of the young are staying, which is good. That is good news.
So you're talking about the non-dom community. What I've actually heard is that our own British youth are taking their digital nomad visas and going to other European countries.
Yes.
Because their pounds stretch further.
Yeah.
And they're getting, you know, better quality of life, better weather, etc. And the bigger worry is, are they going to come back?
Well, I think that's true. I mean, I think that is true. A lot of the yes, they are. They're all thinking of going to Barcelona or Amsterdam. I mean, I know my daughter. One of my daughters is always thinking where she's going to move to. You know, and she probably will move somewhere because she doesn't need to physically be here, and nor does her fiance. They can work from from wherever they are. So I think that's a separate discussion altogether. But I think that but it is still all revolves around housing. And you are quite right that housing is a very, very, very emotive thing. And the reason why the younger think, because they can live a much better quality of life, they can have instead of living in a 400 square foot apartment, which costs £600,000 in, SW7, or SW6, they can live in somewhere, very decent and have better weather and be close to the beach and stuff like that. Well, why would you not want to do that? And so you are right when you say it's all around housing. The problem with this country is it's a very small, overpopulated island, and that makes land expensive, and land being expensive drives up the value of property, and it has got to a ridiculous stage. I mean, I remember sort of 20 years ago, somebody was saying to me, "Gosh, property's getting really expensive now, isn't it? Look how much it costs to buy a house in Chelsea." And I remember saying to that person, "Forget about how much it costs to buy a house in Chelsea for a family house in Chelsea. Look what it costs to buy a 2-bedroom flat in Earl's Court." I mean, I remember saying to somebody, "It's like £175,000. That's ludicrous." Now that flat in Earl's Court would not be 175,000.
About 900,000.
Yeah, exactly. That's even more insane.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I guess the good news is that you can grow your property wealth if you manage to actually get on the stepladder to begin with.
Well,
right, because that's where it's going to grow the most.
Yeah.
And I think we've all been trying to cheer ourselves up by saying the Americans are coming, but actually the Americans really are coming. And there is a problem now with going to universities in America and all the restrictions that they're putting on that, which is making our universities more attractive to them, whereas a lot of our graduates are looking to the States because it's so hard for them to go from private schools to really good universities here. So the whole thing is kind of, it all works itself out in the end. But how does all of this translate, in your opinion? I mean, I think I know your answer, but how is this all translating into what's going on at the top end of the market?
Well, strangely, it depends what you mean by top end of the market. The area where there is some activity is sort of 20 to 40 million. There have been as many sales at that level in the first part of the year as there would normally be. They're not often reported. They don't tend to get on to Lonres.
Yeah.
But there have been transactions. I've been lucky enough to be involved in a couple of them. Where it's really difficult is the sort of the 8 to 15 level, where there's a huge amount of stock, and frankly, all those properties are too expensive. You look at them on Lonres and you think every single one of them needs a 20% price reduction, and even then, maybe more. It's all about price at the end of the day, and there are buyers out there. There always are buyers out there, but they don't see any value. And that's the difficulty. They will come out to play when they see value, but we are at that stage where we still have vendor resistance and denial, and until that, it's getting easier. It's getting easier. The vendors are easier to deal with than they were a year or so ago. They are starting to understand, but there's still quite a long way to go. If you compare it with the early 90s recession, you would see a house would be on the market. You could buy a very good house in Chelsea for £800,000. You'd see an asking price of 800, and the selling price would be, 25% less. It'd be 600,000. So the difference between asking price and selling price is getting much greater, but it's still, there's still a lot of overpriced stuff around. People are not really aware of, what they have to do to, and a lot of that is the agent's fault, because the agents are still keen to get instructions, and so will sort of
pump up the price a bit.
Promise something that really they know they can't deliver, and all they're doing is just creating a time for their own back. Yeah.
And the time delay.
Yeah, and a time delay.
Well, I guess the good news is that people can still afford to hold on. And I think the thing that's really different in this market compared to some of the markets you and I have experienced is that repossessions are happening quite often, but they're still not generating excitement. And, properties that need modernization have almost become, before there'd be a queue around the block when something was needing work.
Totally right. What everybody wanted back in the old days was an unmodernized house they could put their own stamp on it. Nobody wants that now because of the cost and time of building works and
the uncertainty.
And the uncertainty, cost of time of building works. And also uncertainty is a really strong point. The resistance to buying unmodernized properties first started after the credit crunch. Before that, in the sort of glory years, the Tony Blair years, 97 to 2007, there was a lot of certainty. And so people knew where they were going to be in 3 years' time. And so they could afford to, they didn't worry about the fact they were buying a house that was going to take them 3 years, because they knew that they'd probably have to be promoted by then, they'd have a better job. Ever since then, ever since the credit crunch, that uncertainty's gone, and people just do not want to have to deal with builders. So yes, I mean, that's an area of the market, and again, that creates problems with vendors, because you have a vendor who thinks his house is in great shape. He's lived in it for 25 years, but he thinks there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
So he thinks it's What do you mean they want to change things?
Yeah, why?
Actually, it's not just they want to change things. They want
to rip it completely down.
And so we had that disconnect between the buyer saying, "Look, I love the house and I love the street and so on, but there's going to be yellow skip outside on day one," and a seller who's saying, "Well, and so that's
just per personal choice. There's nothing wrong with the house." Yeah, we've all been there. We've all been there. So if you had advice for sellers and buyers, what would you say to them in this current market that we're in?
If you're a buyer, you got to buy the best thing that your money can buy, can let you buy, and so you need to buy the best quality thing, and for that, and this is where it gets difficult. For that, you may still be paying on a pounds per square foot basis the same as you would have done at whatever peak in the market you might care to mention. And there have been a couple of deals done very, very recently where people have paid £4,000 a square foot for a house that was modernised 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But it just happens to be in position A. I mean, absolute triple A. And or it's like anything, buy the best you can afford. If it's a one-bedroom flat, buy the best type of one-bedroom flat. You know, don't say, oh, well, hang on, for that I can buy a two-bedroom flat. Yeah, but the two-bedroom flat's in the next street, which is nothing like as good, and so on and so forth.
And the sellers know that, because, you know, when you've got something that doesn't come up very often, then in whatever market you're selling it, you're going to want to get your price, and there'll be someone who's willing to pay it, especially in a place like London.
Correct.
Yeah.
But generally for sellers, that's the exceptions we're talking about, but generally for sellers, you have to understand that the buyer is looking for value. So that's the other side of the coin. So generally for sellers, you have to be flexible.
Leave something on the table for them.
You have to leave something on the table. If you don't, the slightest little thing that goes wrong in the transaction, that's the fall-through rate. The fall-through rate of transactions, I think, is about, well, it's not exactly 50%, but it's not far off. That's colossal. I mean, if you get the Lonres stats every week, you can see the number of properties that have actually exchanged contracts, and then you can see the number of properties which have actually fallen through. Actually, it's very often nearly the same number. 25 exchanges and 19 fall through, so it's a lot more than 50%.
Well, I guess the good news in that scenario is there's activity.
Yeah, sure.
There's activity,
activity,
which is more than we could have said, 6, 7, 8 months ago.
No. There is definitely activity. There is definitely activity, but it's at the end of the day, it's always been about price, hasn't it? So regardless of non-doms, less buyers being around, if the price is right, from somewhere a buyer will appear. Don't ask me how, where, but a buyer will appear. If the price is wrong, then your house is just going to sit there, for
And there is
years.
Something to be said before thanking you and saying goodbye. There is something to be said about when you bought and what position you're going to be in now. Yeah. So the people who bought, we all starting to know the dates. Like, oh well, if you bought in 2015 to 2017, then you're in a slightly different market than, if you bought pre-2005, let's say.
That's true, but nobody knew at the time. People who were buying in sort of 2003 didn't think, oh, this is great. I'm going to see a colossal, uplift. Nobody knew that at the time. Yeah. It just, the market, when the real rise in the market was between sort of 2006 and 2007, it just went like that.
Yeah.
And nobody really knew why. So, that's a slightly scary thing, actually,
and then it happened again in 2015, 16.
Yeah.
And, the conversation that I'm having with people is, my flat's not selling or my property is not selling. And I say, okay, well, how much did it cost you? Mm. Are you willing to walk away with that money?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not going to get anything more than that money.
No.
And that's something that I think people, who bought in a certain period of time need to get their head around, that, if you can get away with getting your money out, then you're in a good position.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, I mean, you could have done better things with the money, but also you have to have somewhere to live. So when people say, well, yeah, but, I could have, you have to
put it in bonds, yes, but you can't live in those
exactly.
bonds.
Yeah, well, you could live on the street whilst you've got all your money in bonds. Well,
yes, exactly.
Might get a bit tedious.
Well, listen, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Hopefully we will hear some good news about this.
We will.
Inevitable U-turn that we're expecting. It'll bounce back. And obviously, if anybody's got any questions and wants to make decisions, people like Jeremy collaborate with us, and they can help you navigate this difficult market and make the right decisions for you and your family.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.